So my father's 6.9 had a bit of a clicky speedo. Now the cable had been reinserted after the engine rebuild 13,000 Ks ago, which is about a decade ago now. And using an online EPC, these are easy to find. You can see in section 54 the speedo cable, part number 562, and the grommets part 574. Now, very importantly, these cables differ for left-hand drive and right-hand drive cars, as well as the engine and the transmission, because it's going to influence the length of the cable. Now, here's an old speedo cluster from a 6.9 that from one of the ones I've wrecked. You can tell it's a 6.9 with a 260 km/h speedo. So on the back, you'll see the central part of the cluster is that threaded area. Now that's where your cable is going to attach to. So when you pull this cluster out of the dash, that's the bit you're going to unthread. Now normally I can just do that with my finger. On my dad's car, it had been locked on way too tight. And I think that may be because the wrong cable needed to be stretched in. So I've actually had to take the steering wheel off, which is just a 27mm bolt, to access the cluster because it was on so tight. It was really difficult to get off. And there looked like there was some damage to the threads on not only the cable, but also the actual cluster attachment. It was a really difficult job. So there's the cable, which actually feeds through to the passenger side. And this is why left-hand drive cables are shorter, because they don't need to cross over the center console. Now, you don't need to take the center console out, thankfully. You can see it just tucks under there, probably a few centimeters up. And I'm going to show you how I got this out now. So from the back of the car, the cables, whether it's left-hand drive or right-hand drive car, will enter the transmission tunnel on the left-hand drive side. The left-hand drive side being a reference to when you're sitting in the car facing forward. So not a great view at the moment. I'll hone in on that. And so there's the cable actually right in the center, looping up. And as I said, this car had a complete engine rebuild, so it may not have been put in the correct spot. So from the front, there's the dry sump for the 6.9. We come down. You can see that cable just above the yellow bar. And there it is, entering from the internal cabin. The grommet's not in a great shape. And it's just looping under there opposite the transmission oil pan, under that cross member which has the transmission mount, and just up there is a 10mm attachment, which I'm going to show you from a better side. And I'm sorry about this shonky vision, but I wanted to show continuity so you know where we are. So with the light, you can just see that cable, which is sort of press fit in there, and it'll focus in just a sec. So there's the 10mm bolt that you're going to undo, and it's actually not that complicated. You don't need an angled piece. Just put your small ratchet and socket on there. Undo that, and then the cable simply feeds out. I believe they're magnetically driven or something to that effect. So once you've done that, you can actually just pull that down, and then you're going to feed it into the cabin. So there's the insulated speedo cable. And in a second, I'm probably going to pull that down. There we go. And that will actually feed into the cabin. So you can see the end there, which goes into the transmission. I'm sorry, that will focus in just a second. There we go, that's the spinning segment, which turns. And so I'm just going to feed that back in. Now, looking from there's the damage to the threaded section. And there's our cable, which can now be fed. So it's actually kind of loose. This wasn't overly tight, mercifully, because I was worried I was going to have to take the cluster, the whole center console out. So we're going to feed it from the driver's side on the right over to the left. So in the driver's footwell, you can see the cable coming down, held in by the bracket, and it's kind of loose there. And you can see when I wobble the cable from the dash side of things, it's actually pretty loose there. So we're just going to feed that down. There you go, it's pushed down, and then you can see it's actually not that tight, because when we do this, we've got some play in the left footwell. You can see here, there it is. I've pushed it through from driver's to passenger side and just gently pull that through. So I'm hoping it's not so difficult to get back in. So there's the grommet, and the part number was provided earlier. I'm not sure if that would come with the cable, but then we're just going to feed that into the cabin. And then basically we can pull that out. Now that's the cable that was in our car, a 107 part number. This is where using the EPC itself gets confusing, because even I couldn't figure out which is the correct part number for the 6.9. I understand the right-hand drive ones are no longer available, and you'll see the number pop up in a sec. And the 450 SEL ones are a different part number. I believe they're 5 centimeters shorter. Obviously, with a bigger engine, it pushes the transmission back, which means you need a longer cable. These look like the part numbers for the 6.9 specific cable, and you can see the right-hand drive one's 25 centimeters or so longer than the left-hand drive one, but I can't get the right-hand drive. You can see the damage to the cable that's on this because it was cranked on so tight. It's really been locked on previously. So we're going to see if we can have this one refurbished, and I hope the video has helped you in some way.